unit in, our elders' homes.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't even think about that, and we don't even think about the things that we're losing. I mean, one of the things that I know Mr. Boyd was involved in was this whole discrimination thing, which was a big case back in the 90s, and I guess it's still having its impact. So if you could share a little bit with us about what that case was about, because I know it's they said the largest ever civil rights class action settlement, so I know that a whole lot of money was made on that, and my mom actually worked on until she retired several years back at the Golden Leaf Foundation, which of course was a lot of the tobacco settlement money. So if you would just tell a little bit about what that case was all about.
Right, and those are two separate things. The farmers' discrimination case, which initially became known as the Pickford 1 case, and that was in 1997, and then there was the late Fowlers, which became known as N. Ray Black Farmers Discrimination Case, and the deadline to file for that case for those who had missed the opportunity to file for the first phase, which after the filing deadline, I think they received roughly about 83,000 late applications. So my husband went back to Congress, and they worked very diligently and had the bill passed, and it was part of the 2010 Reclamation Act. And so after they even won the case, then they had to come back and get appropriations funding for that second phase. And the deadline, that they had a fairness hearing. And that's the thing, is all of this is part of a legal process. So when you hear people saying certain things and you're like, no, because that doesn't fit into the way that a class action is handled. So there was no fee to participate in the class lawsuit. But there were several individuals who were being charged monies for an application, and that was just wrong. And, in fact, it's happening today. People are still calling, and they're saying, I want an application. But the deadline to file in Ray Black Farmers, where they came back and they combined all the cases, was May of 2012. Since that time, this case is now closed and settled. So there are no more applications. There's no remaining monies. There was roughly, I think, about 200 farmers who were unable to cash their checks or settle their claims. So those monies went back in. There were leftover monies, what's known as cypre, and those funds were addressed in the settlement agreement. And the way that the settlement agreement was originally written is the cypre beneficiaries, nonprofit organizations that had worked to assist black farmers prior to the settlement would receive an equal share of that money. They would be identified by class counsel. Well, class counsel went back to the judge and amended that settlement agreement. And then they brought Farm Aid in to create the process. So I think Farm Aid got $50,000 or $75,000. And we're like, what? Farm Aid, and we've got the black farmers and the discrimination. So there's been some ups and downs and bumps and bruises, I think, along the way. But they have paid out phase 1, and I think that was about $4.8 million out of that $12 million that's been paid out, and there's roughly about $8 million left over. And so I want to say to our communities out there today and those black farmers, get in touch with class counsel and these individuals who are serving on this committee, creating a phase 2 process for those monies to be distributed.
Wow. Because one of the things we talked about on the show in the past is just about how in education we got away from learning about trades, like whether that's auto mechanics or vocational trades. But it also seems that our school system has gotten away from learning about farming. Like I said, I grew up in Warrenton, North Carolina, and I remember, I was not one because I lived in the city limits, but I remember many of our kids would not start school till late, because they, those of us who were in the city limits would be in the regular school system, but they might not start till a week or two later because they were doing they were getting their crops into the market for their families and everything. So they might start a week or two late. And then there was also like the farmers associations, like the farmer groups that are in the high schools and everything. I don't hear about those as much now. I don't know whether 4-H or those farmers associations are as big as they used to be.
And that's the problem. Those organizations are there, but a lot of times our children of color, are not participating. And I think that goes back to the families really not always knowing the information, but understanding the key importance, because there's scholarships. Future Farmers of America is their FFA, and there's also, I'm trying to think, another organization that's funded in part by Land of Lakes. I think it's called Partners. I can't remember. Please forgive me. But our kids, through it's our taxpayer dollars, and through cooperative extension, they oversee the 4-H program, and they have camps every year. And so there's a lot of opportunities, and even animals going to the state fair and different things that our kids could be engaged in. And that's just like at USDA, they have youth loans. There's a youth program, and there's no minimum age to be a farmer. And I think sometimes in present day, there's a stigma that comes with the word farmer, and farmers are equated to be like third-class citizens. And sometimes, I expand that when I'm talking about it, and I say farmers, ranchers, growers, producers, because if you're there and you're growing something, even if it's a part of your operation, and you feel more comfortable identifying as a grower, just like we have people now in North Carolina and Virginia who are growing industrial hemp. And most people say, oh, but that's not farming. But it is. But if you feel more comfortable identifying as a grower, then, as our young people, because we need them to be interested in that process and their innovative creativity to help us fuel our advancement. Because that's where the next generations are going to come from, with their basis of understanding, imparted from the wisdom that our farmers can provide them, currently.
Yeah, because it's really interesting. I mean, even if you think about like the media, I remember I still watch old reruns of like some of the old westerns and some of those shows, and they actually gave a pretty nice view of farmers and things of that nature. Whether it was, and I can't even think of this show, but it's like one of those shows where they're basically loading cattle through the western part of the state and everything, and it's in one of the old westerns. But they gave a good view of cowboys and farming and things of that nature. But I guess at some point in the 20th century, farming, like you said, became almost like a cuss word, and folks started thinking that it was a bad thing. And, I mean, without farmers, we don't have our food. So I've never understood why it became such a negative view of farming. So when y'all are doing y'all's advocacy work, what are you finding is the reasons people don't like farming as much as they probably should?
Immediate satisfaction. And that doesn't come in farming. There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of sowing of seeds and, waiting to harvest time. And what we found, though, is if we're able to help individuals be able to divest and have diversified markets. So let's just say I'm going to grow collard greens. So I've got my seeds, and I order my seeds in bulk. Then I could sell a couple ounces to seeds to some of the other farmers. Okay, so that's some money right there. And then if I plant my seeds, and then I sell a portion of my seedlings, the slips or the transplants, that's a little more money right there. And then if I grow my collard greens and maybe I sell a couple of heads, when it's harvest time, I can crop some leaves and then I can cut some heads. Well, that's some money along the way. And then after my collards have come to full harvest, and of course the way I like to cut mine is I like to grow in the fall and wait till they've had at least one frost, and then we always say they're sweeter. And so I can take those and I can cut them and I can take them up north and I can sell them for more by the bag. So you see, that's a residual, kind of a phasing of the money. But if you have someone who goes out there and they spend $10,000, $15,000 putting in a crop and they don't see any of that return till 5-6 months later when you harvest it, that's hard, because people today want something instantaneously. They want that immediate gratification.
And even coming to that, I mean, I know that the farm equipment cannot be all that inexpensive. So I imagine some people probably think that they are automatically marked out of farming because they're thinking that they got to get like some big size tractor or something that's going to cost, when they look on the farm catalogs or they look into different things, they see it as costing a lot of money. But it seems to me that what you're saying is that they can also, if they get that tractor, they can make a great amount of return, and that there's also ways that they can do farming and or gardening and not have to have all this expensive equipment that a lot of people associate with farming.
Right, and that's why, one of our programs is called Let's Get Growing, and we have another website. It's called We Grow Farmers. And that's the thing is I tell people start small, grow your operation, because not everything works. I can go out here and plant a crop, and it may not do anything, and I may move it, to another one of my fields, and it does great. I have to build up my soil, and and I may get rain, I may not get rain, I may have to add water. And so there's a little bit of gamble and risk that's associated with farming. But if you start small, you don't have as much risk. But, sometimes the greater the risk, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. And so, but finding a comfortable level where individuals even growing mushrooms, indoors in a bag and, shiitake sell for about $10 a pound. So the thing is, find your market. Or if you like to grow chili peppers, and you want to make chow chow or do some pepper jam, those are the things that we can start small. And to me, and not have a lot of capital, not have a lot of startup. And if you can see where the profit is and then you can grow your operation, then you're more likely to succeed and want to keep doing it. But if I got to stay in something, invest a lot of money, and have to wait 5 to 10 years to see a return on it, I'm probably not going to stay with it.
So how much would you say the average farmer that just wants to start a basic farm, like just something really basic to maybe get like some gardening stuff, or maybe do some stuff that they might want to can? Because I remember my mom, before she got involved in a lot of other things like media and stuff like that, she would do some stuff with gardening and canning. And I remember like a lot of the canning seemed like it was very simple, just like I remember my grandma having us pop the peas and everything, and that seemed like a very simple process. So it seems like things like that shouldn't cost that much and should probably be done for maybe under a few hundred, under $1,000. I mean, like just a very basic farm, how much could it cost to get one of those going?
I would say $3.
Okay, $3.
$3. And everyone's like, Kara, but, a lot of times I'll do my workshops and I'll take in some mint. I'll take in a mint plant, and I'll use that for a small startup. And we have those workshops. In fact, we have some webinars that are online that talk about starting sustainable and small-scale farms. But let's just say an individual, well, number one, it's free to go get your farm serial number. You go to your county FSA office and you take in a copy of your deed, and you don't even have to own your house. You still have a deed if it's mortgaged, or if you're leasing, you can get a long-term lease, 3 to 4 years. Just says that you have control of that property, because when you go in and get your farm serial number, and if you end up qualifying for payments or reimbursements from USDA, they want to know who to send the money to, and they don't want to come out and do a practice like a high tunnel or something, which is like a greenhouse, that you can qualify for 90% cost share reimbursement if you're not the person in control of that property. And so let's just say you're living in a subdivision and you have a half an acre, a quarter acre of land. You could go to your local farm service agency, get your farm serial number for free, and you could go to Walmart or Home Depot or your local produce or flower florist and get a mint plant. And you could go home and you can plant that mint plant. You would need to plant it in a container, a raised bed, because it's very invasive. It's going to spread. You can't plant it in your front yard, because then your neighbors and their neighbors would all have mint before long. So you're going to plant that around $3 mint plant in that container. Okay, and like I said, you harvest 10, 15 of those leaves. That's about $3. The other thing is you can lay those branches over, cover it with some dirt, and it's going to sprout. It's going to root, and it's going to spread. And then if you take some cuttings off and you stick it in a little cup with some soil, you can sell that now again for what? $3. Now you've got a complete 100% return on your money, right?
That's very true.
Hello.
Hello.
So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't take a lot. Start small when you're thinking, okay, how can I grow this? And so if you have, a pear tree or even a blueberry bush, see, we've lost some of those skill sets. A blueberry bush, and you go and you cut the tips of it off, stick it in some medium, and you can root those blueberry bushes and then turn around and sell them the next year for $14, $15 each.
Wow. So how much?
Go ahead,
what are you saying, Cara?
No, I was going to say, and even you don't even have to put any money in it. You can go into the woods and forage and sell that as part of your farm operation.
Because that's one of the things I do remember. I remember that when I was growing up, my parents at one point were kind of in the, for lack of a better term, the back to nature kind of movement and everything of that nature. They had like subscriptions to Mother Earth News and things of that nature. And my dad had actually formed a collective, a cooperative, I guess you would call it, called